We're back again. We have Father Edward Connolly, pastor in the Diocese of Allentown, Pennsylvania, and we have Susan Gertz, who is a good friend, also a single Catholic living in Cincinnati. Today we are going to talk about what men and women want. This is actually the first of a two-parter. The first one, we're going to concentrate on the differences between what men and women want, and on the next show we'll talk about misunderstandings. For now, what do men and women want? Let's start with women. What do women want? I took a lot of interviews on a recent cruise of ours, and here is what the women said, the men and the women said about what women want.
I think first and foremost, people are looking for somebody that's strong in their faith.
Good communicator. Sense of humor. Respect.
Ultimately, they're looking for a really nice guy.
I think holiness.
Confidence. Leadership.
Physical attraction. And then I'm looking for a man who's virtuous.
Someone that's dependable, reliable, loves children, honest, hardworking.
They're looking for JFK Jr., but he's gone, and there's only one of them. Men are looking for Heidi Klum. That's what I've learned in my 37 years.
I'd say sense of humor helps, but not goofy all the time. Serious when you need to be.
Somebody's also a source of strength for them, and someone who's fun to be around, I think. That's what I think.
And of course, the strong faith there also.
Very good Catholic man who is conservative like me.
Stability and probably just a clear vision.
What some people might term a soulmate. Someone who shares what's most important to them in their life.
A man who keeps his promises.
They're looking for a man who's going to be able to support them and their children, who loves children.
Makes me a better person, and I in turn help him to be a better person as well.
Honesty and a very good, well-grounded man.
And chivalrous, so that we know that chivalry isn't dead.
Genuine, sincere, good looking, a little bit.
Mainly they want somebody who's going to complement themselves.
And the common faith as a solid foundation. And then beyond that, it's the ineffable things.
Yeah.
We want our best friend is what we want. Somebody we can trust.
Well, they really covered a lot there. There seems to be a lot of things. This is actually the first show I feel like I'm spread out with all these notes. I've got, there's a lot to say on this as far as what women want. I mean, I'm taking notes of what I've heard from my experience here, so I'll be referring to them a lot. So Susan, I'll turn it to you. What, in your opinion, do women want, and what do you think is like the biggest thing based on all that we've heard?
I think the biggest thing, Anthony, is probably confidence. And I think rolled into that would be the issue of the man, in a natural order of things, the man being the pursuer and the woman being the pursued. And so if a man is confident enough, even if he's scared to ask you out or scared to approach you but does anyway, that shows, I think, a courage and a confidence, and I think that's really appealing to women.
So what would be other examples of showing confidence? I mean, that's an odd one. You would think some of the other, there are a lot of things that we heard, sense of humor, and I mean, there is a lot that makes up, I guess, what a woman wants, but to say confidence first and foremost, what does that really imply is happening that women are seeing, I suppose, in their dating experiences?
I think a lot of, well, speaking as a traditional Catholic woman, you know, we're waiting for the man to pursue. We're waiting for the man to step up to the plate. We're waiting for the man to approach us and have a plan. And if he doesn't, then we're going to do nothing, and nothing ever happens. So if you want the girl, you have to really go after the girl. I think a great example, at least in my experience of confidence, is a guy who maybe isn't the best dancer. And I know for guys, like dancing is not high up on the list of anything you want to do, but women love to dance most of the time. And so when you see a guy get out there on the dance floor anyway and just try and be out there, that to me says, you know, even if he's not the best dancer in the world, he's out there and he's confident, and that's enough.
Yeah, there is an interesting thought pattern there. I mean, men and women think differently, don't they? And again, on the last cruise especially, there would be like, there are times for dancing, and I'll see the guys just lined up in the back watching all the women in our group out on the dance floor. And, you know, I'm like this, I like go up to each ear, like, what are you doing? Go out there and ask somebody to dance. And the reply is generally, well, I can't dance.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, you're lost, right? And here you're confirming that it's not about being a good dancer that's important, it's about just making the effort.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so effort. There's another interesting thing I heard about men. There's an interesting difference, and it's so true. Men are interested in solving the problem. Okay, so a woman is emotional. A woman is an emotional being, right, Father? They can get emotional for no good reason at all. This is what I've found in my 13 years of marriage.
It's just that the man doesn't think there's any good reason.
Oh, that's a good point. So sorry to insult you there. To us, it seems like no good reason. And probably after we hear it, we still think it's no good reason. However, we're called to, I guess, be a helpmate, right? But our tendency is to fix it. What's wrong? That's the pursuit. And really, women just want a good ear sometimes, or a hug. They just want to cry it out.
Sure, and I think that women, I think the thinking processes are different, at least in my experience. When I'm talking to my female friends, our conversations could go on for 2 or 3 hours because she's going to vent her feelings and think through her process her thoughts and her feelings by speaking them to me or to someone else. Whereas I think a man is going to think it on his own and not say anything until he has a bottom line, and that's what he'll vocalize. So when women are coming to men and they're, just venting basically and speaking and talking about feelings and thoughts to try and figure out, where they're going with things. Men can get frustrated because women are going to go from point A to point B to point C to point D, down to point X to point Z, back to A, back to C. and for them, at the end of the day, that for women is very comforting just to process that way and to get it out. And they're not looking to men, I think most of the time, unless they say, I need your help to get an answer to this. I don't think that's what it is. Really what they're saying is, I just want you to listen and then hug me afterwards and tell me everything's going to be fine.
Wow.
And that's all it is. That's all you need.
This brings up a good point. This is a terrible aspect about men. We're generally not good listeners, are we, Father? Well, I won't speak for you, of course, because you're a priest, but men are called to be a good listener, and this particular example really brings that home.
Right. The point that you made, or both made, that the man wants to solve the problem, whereas the woman is interested in the process. That relates very much to me because as a priest, obviously, I live a celibate life, but that does not mean I do not deal with women. I deal with women all the time. And I have found that I have made mistakes sometimes in my conversations with women who aren't really looking for a solution to the problem. They're looking for a good listener. As the years have gone by, I think I've gotten better at that. And sometimes I have been thanked for what to me seemed like nothing because we didn't solve the problem. But the woman was thought that I was a very fine counselor because I just listened.
Yes.
So there's a lot to be gained from simply saying, oh, I see.
Really listening.
Really listening. Yes.
Well, I think part of that, though, too, is that that to women, that kind of talking and processing and listening, because when you're in a conversation with your female friend, it's just understood. I'm going to call her up and maybe talk for a half an hour about what I need to talk about. and then I'm going to turn the floor over to her, and she's going to talk to me and do the same thing. And so for women, that's a way of communicating and relating. And I think going back to what women want intimacy and communion in their relationships, and relationships are very important to women. So when you're dealing with a relationship with a man in a romantic context, that's a way women are bonding with a man in the way they see it, and they would want some give and take too, and that I think builds on intimacy. Particularly since if a woman is venting to a man, she's really letting herself be vulnerable with feelings and thoughts that she might not otherwise share. And so for her, that's a way of building that intimacy bond, which is what women crave.
And from my own experience, ultimately, I mean, there are a lot of things. We're not ever going to cover everything that women want, or men want for that matter. But speaking of women, from my experience, what they want more than anything is to be made to feel like they're the most unique, special person in that man's life. Okay? That's, men have a tendency to seem disinterested or detached, not quick to always say, I love you all the time, or show those signs, right? Am I right on this about women?
Absolutely, absolutely. And women are like, I told a friend of mine recently, it's like they're like flowers who need water every day. And if you don't water the flower every day with those assurances, then you're going to see that flower die on the vine. Whereas men will tell me, well, you know, I told you I love you 3 months ago. It hasn't changed. And I'm like, but I haven't heard that in 3 months.
That's right.
For a woman, you need those constant assurances. And that, again, I think is the communication issue and the intimacy issue for women.
And it is a daily, because, and the secret, gentlemen, is that if you do that, and sincerely, and they respond to that, they will do anything for you. They will be everything to you.
Undying loyalty to that man who waters that flower every day.
Did you agree with that, Father?
Oh, very much so. One of the things I noticed when I was a high school teacher was that correcting a boy, at least for me, was much easier than correcting a girl, because I'm talking about some little item of behavior, nothing drastic. The boy would accept the correction, like stop talking or sit down or whatever, or a poor mark in a test. He'd accept it objectively. Whereas a girl would sometimes think that you were putting her down as a person because you corrected her behavior or gave her a poor mark in a test. There was one girl, she lingers in my memory. I was afraid that she was going to do me harm because I flunked her in a test. And she was very, 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 very upset with me. I couldn't quite understand it until I realized that she thought I was rejecting her as a person, not simply giving her a poor mark. Wow. It's quite a dance that we go through in this life, learning about the differences.
And the men, you really have to learn what makes a woman tick. That's the bottom line of it. Well, and now let's turn it to the men. Women have to learn what makes men tick. So let's go back to that same cruise ship and learn what the men and women said about what men want.
You want somebody you can share your faith with, and that who has the same, I think, ideas about marriage and what marriage is about as you do.
I want somebody that you can laugh with, you can have a good conversation with.
Many men are looking for a good-looking woman, and I think they also want somebody that's going to love and admire and adore them.
Sincerity, modesty. Modesty is the virtue of chastity, so I think that's very attractive.
If they weren't so faith-filled, maybe they're more looking at exteriors. And I don't know, I'm not a man!
Feminine yet independent at the same time. Yet also, people who are traditional, at least in my sense, who care about their Christianity and want to make that a centerpiece of their relationship.
A friend, they want somebody to be their companion. But in addition to that, they want to ensure that you're attracted to one another.
Someone who would be good with children and is not driven by worldly things. But
someone that's really willing to give of themselves, because it's a kind of a two-way relationship.
Security.
To be loving, want to raise a family.
But also have a lot of fun. And I know they really get into somebody they want somebody pretty, and I know that looks mean a lot to them. Also somebody that's, I would think, somebody that they could share their faith with.
Got a good aspect and grasp of the Catholic teachings.
You can depend on the good times and the bad. And
somebody who makes them feel better about themselves.
Somebody who's honest.
Attractive.
Someone to take care of them, to pamper them maybe a little bit, to take care of their kids, certainly.
Complete their life in some way to make them happier. I think men may focus more on the physical issues than women do.
A good, Catholic woman of faith, who I'm very compatible with.
And that men really are looking for attractive women also. Not just physically attractive, but just attractive outgoing qualities that can be seen kind of quickly.
Now there's a very interesting point in there that I noticed. It seemed like about 5 or 6 of the ladies said that the men, in some form or another, they applied attraction. Good looks is what men were interested in. And not one man said that. What do you make of that, Father?
Well, I think women are influenced by advertising, and they think that advertising, is what men really think. Obviously, advertisers look for physically perfect women or beautiful women in order to advertise their wares. That's not necessarily how men think. Men are not quite as bad or as superficial as some women think, you know what I mean? I think a man who is worth marrying, looks for someone who's going to be a strong woman and a good mother and a good provider for the household. I don't mean a wage earner necessarily, but I mean someone who takes care of the household. Proverbs chapter 31, I think you probably know that, I'm sure you know that, but it's a very, very beautiful chapter. I recommend it to everyone. The book of Proverbs chapter 31. And here's how it ends up. It says, charm is deceitful and beauty is vain. But a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. That's what men want. They want a woman who fears the Lord, a wise woman, not necessarily a perfect face or a perfect form. That goes down the tubes eventually.
Yeah. How about you, Susan? Will you concur with that?
I will absolutely concur with the good Padre. And, I sort of took my own little poll of my male friends, too. And a lot coincides with what the folks on the cruise said, too. One of the common themes that kept coming back was they want a woman with a generous heart or a warmth that they feel comfortable with and that they can have fun with. Yes. And all of them also expressed that they want sort of a loyal woman, a woman who's going to be there for them, and be sort of a moral support or a hope mate to them, while they're being the provider and the protector. But those were the common themes.
Yes.
So.
And it is from my experience as well. I do believe that men have this subconscious programming in the back of their subconscious that has a trigger to it because of all these influences you were speaking of that make them inclined to think at times, if the trigger's set off, that looks are important. As a matter of fact, they're very important. But when you talk, when you're in the rational conversation with them and they're in their clear, conscious mind, it truly is not what they're looking for. They definitely have a lot of interests that are different, and they have their problems with what they observe, especially in dealing with women, that set them back, what have you. But I think we're correct in this, in the direction we're going.
Certain women, it wouldn't be charitable to mention their names. I'm talking about women whose names are on everybody's tongue in the media, who are super glamorous. Men will sometimes look at them and among themselves will sometimes make jokes, which are sometimes a little crude, and speak about these women as if they were very desirable. But that's all just bravado. That's just, you know, talk. That's just locker room talk. A man doesn't want to marry that woman.
Exactly.
Because, you know, no, that's not the kind of woman I want to be the mother of my children.
Exactly, and women should realize that. I don't understand why they don't see through that. Any man who responds to that has a distorted way of responding to it. It's not an authentic way. So I think in the end, the true colors always show up in the experience of the person.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I want to turn now to our experts quickly to see what they had to say as I interviewed them and asked them questions about what men and women want.
To the Catholic men out there, I would say, you know, the men pursue, all right, and women dispose. You know, men propose, women dispose, I guess is the best way to say it. And you know, the way to have success in Catholic dating is to be out there and to be actually pursuing the vocation of marriage, and not, you know, hanging out with your buddies for yet again another Friday night. Because, you know, women believe what they see. Okay, you could say all kinds of things, but it's whether your action backs that up. And you know, someone who wants to be a spiritual leader, wants to be the head of a Catholic household, needs to start, you know, acting and spending their time like someone who is going to be able to do that. That will increase, you know, your credibility, I think, with the women that you go out with, that this is truly something that you want. This is something you're capable of doing, and something that, you know, you believe that you're called to do.
Most people don't recognize this. It took me a long time to recognize this. But trust is the basic foundation for relationships. Trust is the ability, Anthony, to feel safe. Trust means feeling safe with someone. So we need to feel safe if we're going to have a healthy, loving relationship. So oftentimes we don't recognize this. One has romantic love, one moves into the friendship, and the trust hopefully will grow. But sometimes things happen where people, where they have a trust weakness. That all of us this side of heaven have trust weaknesses. Everybody's had hurts growing up, parental, siblings, peers, teachers, coaches, etc. And the danger, though, in many relationships is that seem to go well, and then this tension develops. And the person can have a difficulty maintaining trust, either because of what's going on in the relationship, or frequently because of growing up in a family where there was difficulty or stresses.
The reason people do not trust is because there's been a breakdown in society. The factors involved in are manifold, but basically you do not trust is because you've been betrayed or you've been exploited at some time in your life. How can you trust if you're 8 years old and your parents have divorced and separated? There's a trauma there, there's a wound which can be healed, but it's one that is very much there. If you've been abused, if you've been exploited, if you're a woman who's been exploited many times by men in a sexual sort of way, for example, or not even sexually, but emotionally manipulated, well, you're wounded, you feel betrayed, and it's your level of trust for the next man you encounter is going to be lower by the very nature of things. And actually, this whole thing of trust has to do with institutions. Clearly, the church itself, in its human element, the great disaster of the priestly abuse scandal of several years ago, did enormous damage, and it's a great tragedy from which the church will resurrect after this very long passion which you've gone through. But naturally, people will not be as trustful as perhaps they should be, because really the problem was huge, but it wasn't, that it was a very small percentage of priests or religious who acted in this sort of way. We could talk about Watergate of 40 years ago or Clinton-gate of a few years ago. The whole idea, do we trust our government? Do we trust our intermediate institutions? So it's not simply a question of marriage, but clearly when you see people not living up to their commitments to you, you become mistrustful of people. And it's a very sad situation.
Many young people today, they were hurt, they made a mistake. They gave in to the sexual utilitarian philosophy. They were sexually active with other people who were totally untrustworthy. And then later, it becomes very hard for them. We have many young adults we treat in their 20s on serotonin reuptake inhibitors because they have social anxiety disorder. They're afraid of being hurt anymore. It's like they've been through several divorces and they're 25 years old, you know, and so they've been wounded, and they're afraid to trust, but they want to trust because they know that trust is key. So here, if one could recognize one has trust weaknesses, and then try to grow in thinking, I want to be more trusting, and here the spiritual side can be very helpful. I've heard people say that John Paul II thought the image of the Lord given to St. Faustina, rays of mercy and love flowing out of his heart, in other words, Jesus, I trust in you, was a major image of Christ for our times. I know from my small perspective of the universe, I can believe that, because my day is filled with people who are trying to work on the trust wound. In my work, this is the single most difficult wound to heal. This is much more difficult to heal than sadness, than anger, than confidence issues.
Everybody watching this program who has gotten married or hopes to get married is going to marry somebody with what we call original sin, with shortcomings. And that is why part of love is carrying other people's burdens, putting up with their shortcomings. Perhaps their physical illness, perhaps their limitations, perhaps their psychological quirks, perhaps their desperate psychological needs. And where marriages go sour is a person does not want to give themselves away.
Oh, sure. There's this. There's an epidemic of catastrophic thinking about marriage today, Anthony. There really is, because of the divorce rate. You know, because of divorce. I had this in my own family. Several younger sisters were divorced before I married, and that can impact you. I have many young people I work with. They love somebody, they're dating them, but they're holding back. And I said to them, look, I really think the divorce culture, the divorce that's been in your family, is causing you to hold back in terms of committing yourself and giving yourself and the sacrament of marriage. This fear of divorce today, regardless of any other trauma in a person's life, just the fear of divorce, I think, is influencing many people to hold back in terms of their trusting more and their giving themselves more. But fortunately, if a person thinks the person they're dating is trustworthy, if they keep asking the Lord, Lord, build my trust, build my safe feeling. John Paul II had an expression, purification of the memory. Purify my memory of times in my past when I was betrayed. Forgive those people who hurt me and help me grow to trust. And Our Lady can play a very powerful role here, because for all of us, our first foundation to trust are our mothers. So John Paul II's motto, totus tuus, turn to her.
I'd invite women to reflect on the scripture in the book of Ephesians about where Christ has explained, and the apostles are discussing the issue of wives, be submissive to your husbands. The idea of leadership by a man in a Catholic marriage. I mean, women are so independent in our society. I'm a perfect example of that. I'm in a very male-oriented profession. I can support myself, and it's very easy to think, I don't need to get married. And I think a lot of women, send off that kind of a vibration. If you can add to my life, fine. If you can augment it and bring in more good things, that'd be great. I'll consider you. But if not, don't bother me. And I think that if you're seeking the vocation of marriage, you need to reflect on whether you give off a vibration like that, because I think men are sensitive to that, and I think they can detect that. The idea of submitting to one's husband, that gets a lot of bad rap. But if you read the verse of Scripture carefully, what it says is that you are submitting your will to that of your husband because he is following Christ. So by submitting to him, you're submitting to Christ. And that's a good deal all around. I think women need to reflect on that scripture and reflect on their role in marriage in that way. I mean, women are the heart of a marriage. They are, the love and the emotion and all those warm and fuzzy things that you hear about. But a marriage needs leadership, and men very easily are emasculated. A woman who takes charge of everything because that's how she is in her work life. Now, that's not going to translate real well in a love relationship, and particularly in one, a Catholic relationship leading to marriage, where you want the man to be the spiritual leader. Let the man lead, and if he's following Christ, he'll take you where you both need to go.
That's what marriage is. It's a covenant, it's a contract witnessed by God through the ministry of the church, saying this man and this woman are entering into a holy union, which is a means of holiness for them, by which they bind themselves to one another until the other one or the other dies. And put it in very prosaic terms. And the church does its best in order to witness it, and hopefully, as you are doing, as a member of the church, as much as a diocese is, through your ministry, through your apostolate, so to speak, with people who are looking to get married, and then afterwards married couples, is preparing them to have healthy, long-lived, fertile marriages that is open to life. When we say fertile, a marriage is fertile not simply in having children, but in many other things, beautiful things that can come out of a Catholic, strong Christian marriage.
What was talked about there is trust, the problem of trust. Men have trust issues, women have trust issues, and a lot of times they don't even know it. You know, there really are things subconsciously in us from unhealed events in the past or whatever it might be that need to be addressed in order for them to make a perfect act of trust, which is so critical in a relationship. Isn't that right, Father?
Oh, absolutely. I put more stock in somebody saying, I trust you, than to say, I love you. I love you is good, but I can't, that's like nailing Jello to the wall. But if somebody says, I trust you, that's very, very specific. So I have sometimes in my dealings with young couples who are getting married, I say it jokingly, but not so jokingly, do you love one another? Oh, sure. They say, oh, yeah, sure. I said, but do you trust one another? They think, you know, if you say, I trust one another, I'm more impressed than if you say you love one another.
Well, they've probably never talked about it.
Right.
Trust doesn't seem to come up. It seems to be, I guess, implied or assumed, or maybe it's just never talked about.
Right.
I don't think that it is. I think that most of us, as we progress in our single lives, we amass lots of different experiences, lots of dating experience, and focusing on the negative would be carrying, and I mean, I've been guilty of it myself, carrying those past negative experiences into your current situations or your current relationship. When I think the positive aspect would be that to take what you learned, you know, about yourself, maybe from those past experiences, but then to approach the new person in a positive light, because they're a unique soul different than any other soul. Yes, men are men, but that person is still a unique soul that should be allowed to be given a chance to unfold before you, and to, you know, assume that you can trust that person until they give you a reason not to.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. That's all the time we have for today on that issue. And for more information about this subject matter and anything else, come to our website, www.roadtocana.com. There are information, resources, our trips. More of these shows are available on the site, and we encourage you to share these programs with other people, because there's so much work to do to help out these single Catholics to become the people they are to become in their future marriages. And remember, while you're on this road, to trust Jesus at all times and keep his peace with you forever.
'Cause it matters.